Hare Krishna, welcome back. It's another Sunday morning here in Daegu, South Korea. And here we are with the Bhagavad Gita as it is by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. We're going to read chapter 5, verse 22 through 25 today. Try to keep my ranting to a minimum, unless it's totally relevant. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Wanted to see if I could do just 2 perfect mantras today. I counted 8 long syllables. It's the first time I'm counting them. Let's see how many there are. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Okay, so I stuttered a little bit, but I did get it. All right, let's get right to it, folks. You know, in this temple, we're far more interested in the reading than the mantras and the religious recitational stuff. If you're more interested in that, you can, of course, go to many other places that do that much better than me and more actively and more frequently and so on. No hard feelings there. This is Prabhupada made a house for the whole world. And like it or not, I am in this house too. Verse 22, an intelligent person does not take part in the sources of misery, which are due to contact with the material senses. O son of Kunti, such pleasures have a beginning and an end, and so the wise man does not delight in them. It's an excellent verse. There's some really strong language here and some key things to point out. This is, in my notes here, I wrote a very convincing argument on renunciation of the material world and its temptations. So the key, if there was one key to this verse, it's the sources of misery. That's like the one phrase which seems to be the key here. Dukkha, distress, is literally the word there that means misery. And basically what Krishna is saying here is, why bother, it's like, I don't know the quick way to say it, but we use in English, we often use the metaphor of a Band-Aid. You can only put so many Band-Aids on a deep wound before you realize you have to go deeper to the original cause to fix the problem. There must be some quick way to say that. I don't know it. I just know the word Band-Aid, and then it all comes back to me. So we could beat ourselves up over something immediately miserable. Like, you have let's say a big fall down. Oh my God, she's pregnant, or whatever. I don't know, something material, sense gratification gone horribly wrong, and then you get miserable and you say, oh, how can I fix, this thing or that thing? Well, I think that's how we get stuck. It's because that's all you can do. When it's that bad, you don't have the sattva guna, you don't have the patience, the time, the energy to really go to the source of all misery itself. But that's obviously what Krishna is saying here, is that why bother, working with this sense object or that sense object or this sense or that sense? Just go to the source of it all and fix that, and then you'll be really, really, really happy in a wholesome and sustainable way. And what is that source? Well, Prabhupada says here, or translates it as contact with the material senses. Notice that's different from sense objects, just the senses, just contact with material senses at all is the source. Now, this is, if we're just looking at this sentence so far, I'm going to start thinking, well, this implies some really hardcore kind of Buddhist renunciation, or like Zen Buddhist, right? Where we like lock ourselves in a dark room and turn off all the senses until we can be, comfortable within, and we don't need any senses or sense objects. And that can definitely work. That could be what Krishna is pointing out here, because remember, this text is 5,000 years old. So that was a much more common practice back then. But these days, of course, just contact with the material senses for pretty much all of us is practically unavoidable. It's so regular, it's so normal, and it's so unconscious. Just drinking some Seal of Solomon tea. It was really hard not to buy this in the store. I saw another Korean guy picking it up. Anyway, let me know if you know what it even means. It's some herbal tea that's like common around here. And it's got a really cool name, the Seal of Solomon. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So like we might find ourselves chasing a sense object or enjoying some sort of sense gratification. But before you can do that, before you can even conceive of doing that, you need to have some sort of contact with some sort of material sense. And so, that's like obviously true. Well, at this point, if you're paying attention with chapter 1, 2, 3, and 4, it should actually at this point be obviously true that that's how this works. And also, if this seems too much to, avoid, too much to, I don't even want to think about getting a sadhana to, to release myself from all contact with material senses. Well, that's what the next part of the verse is about, which is a very powerful rhetorical question from Krishna, which is like, all this pleasure has a beginning and an end. So in a sense, it's not real. It's all temporary. And by in a sense, I mean, it is in fact not real. But you can, in the beginning stages, which I'm still at, it can be useful to think about this in a like rhetorical, logical kind of way. It is obviously true, though, that when you're comparing the eternal world to the temporary world, in that sense, anything temporary is definitely not real compared to what is eternal. But most of us don't have eternal consciousness, including myself. I'm living within a lifespan of 80, 100 years, something like that. If I make it to like 85 and I don't have any chip inside of me or no synthetic robot part of my body, and I die naturally, I'd be very happy with that. Even before 85, it's probably fine. There's not much more here for me. Except for this. Except for the Bhagavad Gita and sharing it with others. It's pretty much the main thing that my soul, I think, really likes doing here. It's really hard to get this practically right, because even though you may know a pleasure is temporary, just like your whole material lifetime is temporary, that doesn't mean a pleasure doesn't feel good. That's why it's called pleasure, because it does simply feel good. And pain does feel bad. So we need something to counteract that. We do need some sort of taste in real pleasure, in eternal pleasure, and perhaps eternal pain as well. So so that can counteract our consciousness when we think something feels good or feels bad in the moment. If we have the best way to counteract it, I found, is the higher taste. If you have enough, just enough, not a lot, not doesn't have to be overpowering, but just enough experience of real pleasure and real pain at the soul level, in the realm of the eternal, then you still may engage in those pleasures and pains, but you'll have realized that they're just not real. So you treat them like they're not real. There's still pleasure there, but it's like, it's not real. So it's just, everyone else around me is doing it. I guess I'll just play along. Yeah. In the purport, Prabhupada states that a liberated soul is not interested in anything which is temporary. That's basically what I just said, that a liberated soul, while still in a human body in, let's say, the year 2024, most people under that description will be engaged in all sorts of different activities, even if it's just maintaining the body, brushing teeth, and so on, like shaving. When when you're a man and you shave the way I do, the old-fashioned way, with shaving soap, not cream, but a bar of shaving soap and a brush and a single blade going down, it can be quite enjoyable. But it's, for a liberated soul, it's just something you do. So it's not pleasure or pain. It's just something you do to maintain the body. And ideally, eating is like that too. I'm not there yet. I typically enjoy eating more than I should, more often than not. But there are times when I, even have good food, and I'm just like, oh, okay, this isn't that great. It's just like, this is just what my body needs, and it's okay. I do have times like that, but there's still a lot of eating food for pleasure in my life. It's one of the only pleasures I like. That's why there's not that many other pleasures for me. And the last thing in my note here is to read the Bhagavatam verse in the purport. It's a pretty small purport. Most of it is actually other verses from other scriptures that Prabhupada puts in here. One from the Padma Purana and one from the Bhagavatam, 5th canto, 5th chapter, 1st verse, which I'll read now. My dear sons, there is no reason to labor very hard for sense pleasure while in this human form of life. Such pleasures are available to the stool eaters, hogs. Rather, you should undergo penances in this life by which your existence will be purified, and as a result, you will be able to enjoy unlimited transcendental bliss. If there was one verse from the Vedas that the Koreans need to hear, it's this one. I've never seen anyone work as hard in general. I think it's easy for me to say that because, like, I've been to, poor places in Southeast Asia and China too. There are people who are technically working harder. They're working longer hours and whatever else, but they're in a different culture, which is, it seems to me, quite frankly, more advanced. So they're working harder, but they also have this fundamental wisdom that can carry them through that work more. They have a more dharmic culture. But here, they've largely given up on tradition and ancestor worship, and even the, like, Buddhism, like the native religions, they're not really practicing any of that, really. They're just working the same way Americans work, just to get more money, to be comfortable with their life, get a nice car and whatever. And because they're so lacking in a real conscious sense of dharmic culture, I can see their suffering. I can see it's not just see, I can feel it. When I'm just around them, I sometimes get that energy. It just kind of seeps into my energy body, and I feel it of like, oh, we're just working hard just to work, and it sucks. Oh man, this sucks, but I gotta keep going. Ooh. And that's a lot different from what I've seen in, once again, Southeast Asia and China, where yeah, they're working really hard, but they know they're in a more dharmic culture where they really understand, maybe not even consciously, but they understand duty and how important and critical, fundamental it is in their daily life. And they're around other people who also have a high realization of this. So, they're working, but it's like you don't even notice that they're working. You don't even, their energy is different. You can't notice that. It doesn't even seem apparent that they're even working or that they're displeased in their work. They're just working. They're simply working. They're simply doing their duty with no expectation of return, pleasure, or pain. That's why I loved living here for so many years. I would read the Bhagavad Gita and I would look around me and go, oh, these people are doing it. Japan is, of course, very similar to Korea, although in Japan they have kept a lot more of their traditional culture. That's the main difference, is they still have ancient Japanese culture that they're reviving and still practicing. Some of it's dharmic, some of it's not, but it's still just a tradition that they are conscious of and they're proud of and they're kind of putting forth. There's a lack of pride here. I think that's one reason they're not making babies, is because they really don't know what the point is. There isn't a point. When you're a materialist, there's no point in making babies. It's just another expense. Yeah, they're cute for a few years, but they're really expensive, and it's easier to just get a cute little dog, which is what they do. Everyone here has a cute little dog they worship, just like the Americans. That being said, Korea is still vastly better than America. Verse 23. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is a yogi and is happy in this world. So there are many things, there are many practical things, temptations and whatever else, that impulses that we can avoid. The two, here in this verse, Krishna mentions just two that are fundamentally important to avoid: kama, desire, and krodha, anger. Kama, krodha. And in the verse, it's literally mentioned just like that, kama, krodha. Not as the same word. It's actually kama dash krodho bhavam, where udbhavam means generated from. And in the purport, Prabhupada mentions anger specifically, but instead of mentioning desire in general, as Krishna does, Prabhupada uses all these very practical yogic type examples, which I'll read now. There are the forces of talk, mind, stomach, genitals, and tongue. All of those are about pleasure. But Prabhupada mentions the specific sense organs for good reason. Now we have something practical we can look at and check to improve our consciousness. And in the verse, Krishna says, yuktaha, in trance. Someone who can control these things is in trance. Sukhi is happy. Naraha, a human being, is a happy human being in trance. And then in the translation, Prabhupada said, is a yogi and is happy in this world. Now, in the purport, Prabhupada mentioned all these senses and specific sense things to give us a new word, which is synonymous with yogi, a happy yogi. You can also be called a Goswami. That means someone who has mastered the senses. Material desires, when unsatiated, generate anger, and thus the mind, eyes, and chest become agitated. Therefore, one must practice to control them before one gives up this material body. Now, once again, going to the previous verse, if you want to just, look at the mind, the tongue, the stomach, the genitals, and so on, and just check those senses one by one, you can, but also remember there is a source for all that pleasurable misery that we engage in. And the word here is material desires. So long as there's a desire to enjoy with the tongue, enjoy with the genitals, whatever, then there's going to be problems. But if you can go to the root and cut out the desire to enjoy with the tongue, genitals, and so on, then you don't have to worry about the specific tongue doing this or that, the genitals doing this or that. You just, you've won the game at a fundamental level. So you don't have to work as hard at all the particulars anymore. Purport is just one paragraph. And the last sentence is awesome. We're going to read that. It is the duty of the transcendentalist to try strenuously to control desire and anger. That is the purport of the purport. That is the conclusive summary of Srila Prabhupada's purport, which matches perfectly with the verse Krishna has spoken here, where once again, I stressed in the beginning, kama, krodha, desire and anger, these things must be checked. It's only two things, but if you try strenuously and are successful in controlling desire and anger, and perhaps even transcending them, you get the ultimate pie in the sky, prize, whatever. On to verse 24 in a second. Verse 24. One whose happiness is within, who is active within, who rejoices within, and is illumined within, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. So you may have noticed the word within is stressed there several times. On Sanskrit, that word is antaha, which I'm guessing is cognate with our English anterior as opposed to posterior. Anterior is like before, posterior is kind of like after or outside of. Posterior, I think, can also mean like outside of. So anterior would be inside of something. Antaha. And the first sentence in the purport is a rhetorical question, which sums up everything perfectly. Krishna was just talking about the renouncing of external things. And this is, of course, difficult, but how could it even be conceivable if not for the internal pleasure that is available? And this is what Krishna was hinting at in the first verse we read today, verse 22, when he talked about pleasures that have a beginning and an end. He was hinting that there are pleasures with no end. So let's read that sentence now from Prabhupada. Unless one is able to relish happiness from within, how can one retire from the external engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? So this is why Prabhupada and many others have recommended avoiding many different Mayavadi practices, um, Hindu and Buddhist, and there's many that can happen in many different forms. But dry renunciation. This is something to be avoided. To simply, like I said, like lock yourself in a dark room and just like you'll get some benefit for that. But if you don't have knowledge, if you don't know that there is actually a higher pleasure that is actually good, and you're just beating yourself up all the time, many people will go down that path and they will fail. They will not only attain the next level, but they will lose faith and lose hope in practicing some kind of sadhana in the future, a different kind of spiritual path. Now, once you have that knowledge that there is pleasure that does not end, there is a higher taste, and let's say, for instance, you want to get there by, instead of just pursuing that higher pleasure, that higher, just doing 24-hour kirtans, for instance, or playing the prasadam game all out. If you don't want to do that, and instead you'd rather really focus on renouncing those material senses and sense objects, knowing in the background of your consciousness that there is a higher taste, and just being open and ready for that higher pleasure to come in while you're renouncing those material pleasures, that can work really well. That's exactly what I have done in my spiritual life for many years, where I didn't have ISKCON and devotees and the rituals. I had none of that. Bhagavad Gita, living in Asia, and I was doing exactly what I just said, and it works totally well if you want to do it that way. Once again, this is not the recommended way. This is the most commonly recommended path by Prabhupada and coming down since Lord Chaitanya, who has simply instructed us to transcend everything, basically. Just chant the holy names, and if there's problems with that, then just chant the holy names. And if it's doing great, then just chant the holy names. It's a panacea. It's something that's a be-all, end-all, cure-all for everything and anything. So why complicate it? Just do it. I'm fine with that too. This is one of the main reasons I do japa still every day. It's not just because I took a vow and I'm honor bound, and that is true, but it's really just because japa works. That's the main reason I do it all the time. It actually just works. It's a way of chanting the holy names that keeps me engaged and keeps me on a transcendental platform, so I'm not as disturbed and agitated by the onslaught of things happening in this material world. And I'm still not ready to really dive into the realm of music, which I've been really bad at my whole life, most of my life. Hopefully my health will allow me to live a long life so that I can go into bhajan and kirtan more hardcore later on in life. That is my plan. It's not even that it's my plan. It's just, this is, I think, the natural course of my existence. I'm just not ready. And I know how important and, to be honest, dangerous music can be. So I'm waiting till I have some more age, some more years under my belt. Feel free to follow me or not. I'm not asking anyone to do that or not do that. Just sharing my own experience in this incarnation. A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. Factual experience. This could be yet again another hint to what we said earlier, that the temporary world is not real, i.e., it's not factual. So a yogi who is happy in this world means factually happy, not just pleasure, not just he has pleasure. No, he's actually happy. What Aristotle would call complete happiness is achieved by the yogi. And Prabhupada also gives us a new Sanskrit word, Brahma Bhuta. This is actually a state where one is assured of going back to Godhead, back to home. And this is a liberated person who no longer desires external material happiness. All right, let's try verse 25. One who is beyond duality and doubt, whose mind is engaged within, who is always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings, and who is free from all sins, achieves liberation in the Supreme. This is one of those conclusion verses where Krishna's been laying down a specific argument over three or four verses. And then this verse 25 here is like the summary of what he's been talking about for a little while now. Now, one thing that's added here, though, so this may not be the summary. We'll see next time when we read the next few verses. But one thing that is added in this verse that we haven't been talking about at all for a while is that one who is in Brahma Bhuta is always engaged in welfare work for all the sentient beings. In my notes I wrote here, all the living entities. Yep, and that's the first sentence of the purport. Prabhupada says, only a person who is fully in Krishna consciousness can be said to be engaged in welfare work for all living entities. And then over two paragraphs, Prabhupada talks a lot about how someone who is even successful and constantly engaged in welfare work, helping the homeless, feeding the hungry, and so on, if they're not Krishna conscious, they're actually doing a whole lot of nothing. So here's the first sentence of the second paragraph. A person engaged only in ministering to the physical welfare of human society cannot factually help anyone. Once again, there's that word factually, which is a strong hint at the real world, which is eternal, as opposed to the temporary world, which is non-factual. It is temporary, it is not real, it is illusory, it is not a fact. Prabhupada continues, temporary relief of the external body and the mind is not satisfactory. The real cause of one's difficulty in the hard struggle for life may be found in one's forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord. When a man is fully conscious of his relationship with Krishna, he is actually a liberated soul, although he may be in the material tabernacle. It's quite a word, tabernacle. So I like to think that my teaching that I'm doing here, even though it's not directly engaged in chapter 2, verse 3, Bhagavad Gita, and so on, but because I am liberated to some extent, and I do know Krishna is real and great and all that, and everyone around me does not know that, and I'm not preachy either. I'm pretty cool about it. So I'm planting seeds. And, all I can do is hope that these seeds will grow into something. Although there are times, even for someone as cool as me and someone as not preachy as I am, I can tell sometimes I just say a key word like among the foreign teachers here, it could be duty. I just say the word duty and they're like, ugh. Or I just might say God, and maybe the Korean teachers are disturbed or whatever. But, the kids are naturally open minded. So when they see me say Jai Shri Krishna before I eat the snack or lunch, you kind of go, oh, what's that? I said, what do you think it is? We just did a prayer together. Thank you, teacher, for giving us food. We do that 2 times every day, one for snack, one for food. It's totally secular, but it's a little prayer. It's a ritualized prayer we do before we eat. And so, and most all the other teachers, they don't do anything. They administer that with the students, and then I just start scoffing down the food. But for me, I do that with them first, and once they're starting eating, then I say either Om Shri Vishnu, Jai Shri Krishna, mostly to myself. Once again, I'm not preaching, I'm not trying to show off, but I really genuinely do not want to eat something which is not offered first to the Lord. So I have to at least under my breath whisper one little Om Shri Vishnu. I just have to. Um, on Friday, one of my students caught me and he said, "Teacher, why you say Moshi Moshi before you eat food?" So I didn't say Moshi Moshi. Oh, you mean Om Shri Vishnu? He's like, yeah, yeah. I was like, oh, well, I said, thank you, God. You guys said, thank you, teacher, for giving us food. I said, thank you, God, for giving me this food. It's not something he and his family are doing, apparently, but it's a very simple idea. And there's certainly nothing offensive about it, even though they feel uncomfortable about it. I think because on some level they know, oh, well, if that is, the right, decent, true, and good thing to do, then I should be doing it too, but I'm not doing it too. So they're trying to avoid the shame by pointing, you're weird. You're weird. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully they don't crucify me. We'll end on that note. See you next week. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.